Okay guys, Dr. Octobeard here with a very quick tutorial on shadows. So a couple of my students asked me for a way to determine whether or not the player is in the shadows or not. You can see down here, currently I'm in the shade. But if I move back, now I'm in the sun. There's the sun up there. And if I move into the shade again, I'm in the shade. You can see the in sun has stopped counting up and the in shade is counting up again. So here's how I did it. So the first thing I've done is I've created a directional light and I've just set it to a 45-degree downward angle. The next thing I've done in the lighting tab is I've made that the sun source and I've hung it in the sky pretty much where the sun is. Slightly off center there, but not too far. I've just made a couple of trees really simply from planes and cylinders, and I've made sure that the directional light is casting shadows here and that the game objects themselves are also casting shadows. So in order to understand what I've done here, it's going to be helpful to understand the way light works in the game. So light is being cast down from the light source, in this case the directional light. It's being cast down at a 45-degree angle towards the floor. Obviously, as soon as it hits an object, that light doesn't reach the floor, it creates a shadow. We're basically going to do the exact same process in reverse. So if I separate this out here, you can see that what's actually happening here, from this yellow ray here, is I'm raycasting. I'm casting a light back up towards the light source, and if it's not hitting the light source, then I'm in shade. And if I step out of the shade, it goes red, you can see there, it now is hitting the light source, so I'm clearly in the sun. Move back into the shade again, it goes yellow, and back out into the sun, it goes red. Here's how that works. So the first thing you're going to need is an empty game object positioned at the center of your object here called Light Looker. Call it anything you like, and that's what's got the Shadow Finder script on. There's only one variable in here, which is the sun. And this system only works for a single light source like the sun. What I've done there on my directional light, I've just created an empty game object there, and I've called it Light Tracker. If we dig into the script, first of all, you can see this public transform variable here. That's what I've dragged the Light Tracker into. That's the sun over here. I've then created a simple Boolean to detect whether or not I'm in the shade. What I've then done is I've just put a transform look at so that it will track the sun, it will look towards the sun in wherever I move around the map. Now I'm raycasting, I'm going to shift the layer mask. I'm shifting it from 1 to 11, and in order to do that, all you do is you go to the layer here and you add a layer. And you get a whole range of options. I'm going to use 9 and 10 for other things, so I've decided to use layer 11, and I've simply called that layer Light Blocker. And I'm going to put anything that casts a shadow on layer 11. So you can see over here where I've created this tree, I've put it on the layer Light Blocker. If I just take that off for a second and click yes, if I put it back on, you'll see it gives me the option to change all the children underneath, and yes, I do. I want everything that's in that tree, that's in that structure there, to cast a shadow, to block the light. So it does. So all of the things that are in there are blocking that light. Next, I'm just casting a ray. I'm using physics raycast to cast a ray forward because transform look at is always going to be pointing forwards towards the sun. So it casts it forward, it casts it out, and it draws the ray down here. And in this instance, it draws it yellow if it's hitting anything that is on layer 11. And remember, the things on layer 11 are anything that casts a shadow. So if it hits anything that casts a shadow, it's coming out yellow, and the in-shade Boolean is set to true. Otherwise, it's firing straight up towards the light source, and in this case the color is red. It'll go for 1,000 meters. You can change that with this bit here, and I've just debugged the log here to show that it works, and it's switching that Boolean off. I am no longer in the shade. Finally, down here, I've just set this up for your own personal use. If you're in the shade, then it runs the in shade function, and if you're not in the shade, then it runs the in sun function. At the moment, these are blank. They can contain whatever you want to put in them. So for example, one of my students is making a survival game where if you're in the sun, your fatigue counts down because you're under the sunlight. You have to spend some time in the shade, so it counts back up. That would be handled by this system. Another of my students is making a game where if you're in the shadows, the monsters can attack you, but if you're in the daylight, you can't. So knowing whether you're in the shadows or not allows you here to control whether or not the monsters are able to attack them. This system works with just about any asset. You can see here I'm going to drag in a speed tree over here. I'm just going to make sure that that speed tree is set to Light Blocker layer. Yes, change the children. And then I'm going to move over into the shadow of the tree. So it's worth bearing in mind, because of the shape of the trees, that you might not get quite perfectly at the edge. If you just take a quick look at the shape of the trees here, you can see why it might not give you a perfect edge. Because these are transparent PNGs that are coming through, the actual shape of the collider that you're hitting is different from the shape of the leaves that you're looking at. So you might not get a perfect edge on it, but it's still pretty close. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial on shadows and light tracking.